Well, good afternoon, everyone. So happy that you're joining us today for our final session in our four-part series on selling. And super happy to have you here this afternoon. We're really excited to wrap this up and really provide you with some great information to help you in catalyzing the sales within your business. First and foremost, we like to tell you who we are because we want you to know all about the services that we provide to you. SCORE is a national organization. We are part of the SBA. We have over 300 chapters nationwide, and we are the Minnesota chapter. If you're looking for the most stellar mentors, we have them here. Lots of wonderful retirees and a plethora of expertise here in the SCORE Minnesota office. If you're looking at starting a business, looking at needing help with research and planning, opening a business, growing a business, or you're looking to exit a business, there are things that you should know, and we have the resources here for you. In addition to workshops like this, we have a lot of resources through mentoring, so we're happy to provide you with that. We like to thank our community partners. Certainly, those folks are the reason why we're here, and we're super happy to have their financial support. They're the reason we're able to provide you with educational workshops and also give you the mentoring services that you have available. So without further ado, I want to introduce Nabil and myself. We're going to be doing the final workshop today. And Nabil is our chair for the Minnesota chapter. He co-chairs with Doug, and he has worked for several large and small companies, from engineering and management positions, founding small businesses. And honestly, if you're looking for someone who truly understands how to drill down into the metrics of sales and how to use data to catalyze your sales, Nabil is the person that you want to connect with. He is amazing. And he also has a great amount of experience in IT. So we'll be co-presenting this today, and we're happy to be here with you. I'm Paula Biltmore. You can read a little bit about my background there. I'm the chair of the education committee, but I also spent the first part of my career in academia, both teaching and administration, before I became a consultant and worked with a number of organizations, for-profit and not-for-profit, and helping them to start up, grow their business, scale their business, and exit their business. So I have a little bit of information there. So today we're going to be talking about sales. The lifeblood of your business, no doubt. And obviously a lot has changed here in the last year and a half. And some of the things that we're going to talk to you about today kind of wrap up this four-part series that we've been talking about with sales. And I want to start out with the business model canvas. Now, you see us talk about this a lot, and there's a big reason why. If you stay focused on the right-hand quadrant of the BMC, we're going to really wrap up into a nice bow for you today. The value proposition, understanding customer relationships, and customer segmentation as well. And when we talk about your value proposition, we're talking about, a simple statement that summarizes why a customer would choose your product or service. And when you dig down into that, we're going to go through all of this stuff today, but when you dig down into that, there are four pieces that you really want to look at. What value are you providing to your customers? What needs of your customers do you fill specifically? And also looking at the problems that you help solve and the products and services that you offer to different customer segments. And we'll talk about that a little bit further as well. A great value proposition might highlight what makes you different from competitors as well, but it should always focus on how customers define your value to them. So when you're looking at that value proposition, you really want to take some time and spend some time in developing that, because this is going to drive a big piece of your sales and marketing. Anything you want to add here, Nabil?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Paula. I think it's important to note here that the value proposition may be very, very clear in the business owner's mind, but it may not be clear in your customer's mind. So what's important is not only for you to know what that value is, but that you could properly articulate it and present it to your target clients.
That's a really good point, Nabil. We often have, a lot of ideas about what our value is, and we're able to talk to our friends and family about that. But having the ability to articulate that is something that we really want to drill down into when we're looking at, the unique selling proposition. So, in looking at that, and also in looking at inbound sales, our unique selling proposition really starts to look at not just the value, but also the unique benefit exhibited by your company. And whether, your company is providing products or services, you really want to focus on a brand that enables you to stand out from your competitors, as Nabil is going to talk with you about in a moment. When we look at this unique selling proposition, if you don't have something precise here, you're really not going to have success in SEO optimization or pay-per-click advertising. So these are some fundamental steps you need to take and write them out. I think that, the articulation comes after you script. And a big piece of sales, at least what I've learned in my career, is scripting. If you have scripted something out, then you're going to be able to truly refine that and articulate it to the best of your ability. And the focus then becomes not on what you're saying, but how you're saying it. And if you understand communication, then you'll understand that 80% of our message is nonverbal. So really being able to articulate in an enthusiastic way your unique selling proposition is a big piece here. Anything else, Nabil, that you have to add here?
Yes, and I'd like to add that we're trying to separate your sales into two categories here. The inbound, which are people that are finding you based on your value proposition, and the outbound, that's you reaching out to people trying to tell them about your unique value proposition. Here, we're focusing more on this slide on the inbound. These are people that are locating your services based on how you communicate your value proposition, how your business communicates that. And Paula, the point that you're making is that it's important that it is unique, because if it's not unique, then you're going to have to invest a lot of money in marketing to differentiate yourself from your competition, or build a brand, or do other kind of promotional activities, so that you reach that uniqueness. But if you do offer a unique selling proposition, where not very many people are offering that kind of selling proposition, then you stand a much better chance at ranking on that first page of Google for certain keywords, and therefore landing that organic traffic, which a lot of people see as free traffic, therefore increasing your revenue.
Yeah, when you and I talked about this particular slide, Nabil, I was chuckling. When you look at that unique selling proposition, and an activity that I often would tell my clients when they were developing this is, sit down and just have a brainstorming session about your features and your benefits, because the primary driver here is you really truly need to select something, a highlight that is meaningful to your customers, and unique. Because if you're not unique and you're vague, then you're going to end up in this situation, which Nabil is going to talk with you about now.
Yeah, so if you're not unique, then again, you're going to have to spend quite a bit of money to advertise your services. And if you're not doing it correctly, unfortunately, with Google, because it's a platform where advertising is done via an auction, your competition is going to try to leapfrog you with your ads positions, and therefore outbid you. And then that bidding process is going to continue until all profits are drained out. And bottom line, the only company that ends up making profit at the end is, unfortunately, Google. A lot of small businesses send their profits to Google. That's why it's a $1.4 trillion company. If you don't know what you're doing, if your product is not unique, or if your ad campaigns on Google are not taking advantage of specialized and unique features, it's very likely that a lot of your money is going to go to Google without any return on investment to you.
Such a good point. And as we drill down further in looking at the outbound strategy, I love this chart and I love talking about pie. And you have a great example for this, Nabil, that we were chatting about. But when you're looking at your outbound strategy and segmenting your customers, obviously your message may be different if you're targeting a purchaser versus an influencer versus an end user. Do you want to give them that example that you chatted with me about, Nabil? I thought that was really pointed.
Sure. So at SCORE, we like to tell our clients, think about your target clients as easy as PI. And PI here is an acronym. P stands for purchaser. That's the person that buys your product, basically goes through the transaction where they either use their credit card or give you their money. That's the purchaser. Then the end user is the person that uses the product. And then I is usually the one that people not aware of or not sure about, and that's the influencer. And the example that we discussed the other day, Paula, is if, let's say, you have a business that sells SAT educational services to high school students so that they could pass their SAT tests. Your target audience are threefolds. The purchaser is typically the parent, either the mother or the father, that ends up buying that service. The end user is the student that takes that class with you. And then the influencer is potentially the school administrator or the teacher that's involved in recommending that class to the student. And if you're targeting these three different groups, you want to target them each uniquely. So the motivation of each of those groups could be different. So for instance, the parents may be motivated about getting their kids to get maybe a grant or a scholarship, thinking that a better SAT score will give them a better chance at getting that and therefore lessening the bills that they have to pay. The student may be interested in going to a certain school of choice, potentially, and by having a better SAT score, that will give them a better chance to get to that school of choice. And then the school administrators are usually interested in gloating about which schools their students go to. So better SAT score for the students will put more kids in potentially Ivy League schools or highly rated schools that will paint the school in a better image. And if you know the motivation of each of these groups, and it is different, you could target them specifically with ad copy and specialized messages so you can reach those groups and get them to recommend your service or purchase your service.
Such an important piece here where we're looking at the outbound strategy and looking at customers specifically. Knowing your customer is another key piece when after we've done that segmentation and we understand who's a purchaser, who's an influencer, who's an end user, really drilling down into customer profiles or avatars. And Jeremy spent a lot of time on this in the workshop that we did in January. And I thought that was really just amazing in terms of how powerful it is to understanding your customers. And this is a very important exercise for businesses to take on, in addition to their value proposition and unique selling proposition. Building out your customer avatars is something that you really want to sit down and spend some time on. And whether you're looking at the demographics or the psychographics, you should be looking at both of those components within each of your avatars. And you're going to find these are steps, when you take these steps, that can truly, skyrocket your sales results because you're targeting your unique customer. And I know you had talked about some stuff with regard to this, Nabil. You want to share more here?
Right. So accessing your customers, that's what we call an outbound strategy. You want to reach out to your clients. And like you said, Paula, you want to target them in a very precise way. So you want to be able to understand who your customer is, what their profiles are, create a buyer persona for each. We also call it an avatar. And both Jack Morris and Jeremy addressed these quite deeply. Here you're trying to reach your client, and if you can be precise, You could focus your budget to reach the proper audience. You don't want to cast a very wide net because then that will dilute your message. And the better you could paint your buyers' personas, the better off you are. And the more focused you could be, the more money could be directed towards your actual clients.
As we dive more into the metrics at the end of the workshop, I think that, looking at the avatars and then the social media and detailed targeting, here is where the rubber meets the road. This is why you do all the work, right, Nabil? I mean, you're doing it for a reason, and the reason is so that you can truly target who you're looking for and optimize the budget for social media targeting.
Yes, and social media obviously is a very important channel that most businesses should pay attention to. Obviously, there are others such as email, or we discussed previously pay-per-click and organic traffic and referrals. But in this case, social media, what's beautiful about social media is they give us the ability to dissect our target audience demographically and psychographically. So not only we know how to reach people in certain areas or ages or income levels, but we also know how to reach them based on their needs and wants and aspirations and interests. So any of those platforms here could be a potential channel, and depending on who you're trying to reach, some of them may be better off than others. So for instance, Facebook, they tend to be a little older in age. Instagram and Snapchat, potentially younger. TikTok, much younger audience. LinkedIn is more for professionals. Twitter is pretty much for everybody. But based on who you're trying to reach, these platforms give you the ability to dissect your audience in a very precise way so you can target them very effectively.
So after they've done the work and they've segmented their customers, and they've drilled down on their customer avatars, they can go into these social media platforms. On the back end, when you're setting up your advertising campaigns, you have the option availability to utilize that information to help you and not spending so much money just widespread casting this net and then spending a bunch of money on things that really aren't working.
Yeah, absolutely. And if the person knows what they're doing, the person that's creating those ads, they could target that audience very precisely. However, if you don't know what you're doing, and if you're just boosting ads randomly or casting a very wide net, unfortunately, a lot of businesses do that. You end up sending your money over to Facebook. And that's why, again, they are a $770 billion company. A lot of small businesses send them their money, and unfortunately, the return on investment a lot of times is not there.
Such valuable information. When you talk about this, the USP channels and target market, Nabil, and building a scalable engine of growth, there's a lot of facets here. You want to explain this slide to people?
Yeah, so we talked about all the different channels in previous live streams. We have a few of them presented here. So we talked about inbound a little earlier today. That's people that are finding you organically or coming in through potentially a pay-per-click campaign that you have on a search engine like Google or Bing, or through outbound if you're putting out ads on social media, for instance, and you're reaching to a very specific target audience. Or you could also retarget your existing client base or prospective clients with either email nurturing or additional ads on different platforms. All these channels we've talked about extensively in previous live streams, digital marketing live streams. They're all very scalable, and that's the beauty of them. So this is what we're trying to present here is if you do have a scalable engine of growth, you're in a good position to start measuring the metrics that we talked about 3 weeks ago and trying to figure out how best to grow your business since these channels are scalable. However, if you don't have a scalable engine of growth, then it's going to be very hard to come up with metrics and try to come up with any kind of scalable strategy in order to grow your business.
And I'll give a recommendation. If you had not seen the presentation that Nabil and I did 3 weeks ago, you want to go back and really look at that as well, because we did talk about the implementation of client relationship management software, as well as the metrics that Nabil is talking about. And those metrics, understanding that, really does tie into this piece of the presentation. Let's talk a little bit about customer acquisition costs. And you did do a deep dive into this within that first presentation. Nabil, maybe give an overview here.
Yeah, so customer acquisition cost is basically the cost that it takes you to acquire a new customer. And we've went through these metrics 3 weeks ago, but quickly, I'll give you an example. We had an example of a landscaping company where if the lifetime value of your customers, let's say, is $10,000, so if a customer stays with you, let's say, for 7 years and spend $1,500 every year, that's a lifetime value of $10,000. A quick way, a rule of thumb that you could apply to estimate what your customer acquisition cost could be taking that lifetime value and dividing it by 4. So potentially, a landscaping company could spend $2,500 to acquire a customer that will spend $10,000. So if you know your customer acquisition cost, then we could guide you through how to spend your money, whether you should spend it in marketing, sales, or a combination of the two. And in this scale here, it shows, given your customer acquisition cost, where you should spend your money. So if your customer acquisition cost should be below a few $100s, you shouldn't be thinking about investing a lot in actual sales. Most of your investment should go into marketing, because salespeople can be expensive. Marketing could be expensive as well, but it would cost less per purchase, particularly if the average sale is in the hundreds of dollars. So customer acquisition costs below a few $100s, focus all your budget on marketing. If your customer acquisition costs anywhere from $500 to, let's say, $5,000, you're in the dead zone. And that's the zone where Peter Thiel described as it's an unknown. You have to kind of feel your way. And the metrics that we've derived 3 weeks ago help guide you through that process, so you could kind of understand what your lead costs are and how to calculate how much dollars you have to invest in order to create leads. And once you have enough leads that yourself you cannot handle, that's potentially when you need to start looking at potentially hiring salespeople.
And I think that one of the things that I found, I don't know about you, Nabil, when you're mentoring clients, when I had clients that were in my consulting business, most of them are falling within that dead zone. I used to call that the question zone, because that's when you're really asking those questions. That's when you're really reviewing the metrics and having more detailed information to help you in guiding your process and where you're spending your money.
Correct. And many of our score clients fall in that range as well. Obviously, if you're selling to consumers, you're probably on the lower end. Once you start selling to small businesses or larger businesses, that's when you move into that zone or question zone, and then further.
So as we start to look at this, as we start to look at budgeting and where people are spending their money, what suggestions do you have to them about their sales and marketing budget?
And I get that a lot from my score clients. People ask me, how much should I budget? There's an equation, we have it here in front of us. So if you know your customer acquisition costs, and again, this assumes that you have a scalable process. So it's important to build that scalable process. But if you know your customer acquisition cost, all you have to do is multiply it by how much additional revenue you want to create for your business. Divide that by the average revenue per customer. So on average, how much revenue each customer generates. And that gives you the budget that you have to invest in order to create that additional revenue. So going back to our landscaping example here, if the customer acquisition cost is $2,500, and if this company wants to increase revenue by $50,000, and the average revenue per customer is $1,500, that company has to invest $83,000 based on the current engine of growth that they have. They have to spend $83,000 in order to grow business by $50,000 for the first year.
These metrics are so important, Nabil, and I think that once people understand them and understand how to use them to guide their marketing and sales budget, it becomes a lot easier for them to actually make good decisions and viable decisions when it comes to sales.
Yep.
Let's talk. Go ahead.
If you don't mind, if you go back to the previous slide.
Sure. Yep.
The one thing that I get from my clients when I present this to them is, why would I spend $83,000 to get $50,000? That doesn't make any sense to me. And many hesitate when they hear this. And I mean, they're right to do that. The one thing that I want to point out here is that $50,000 that they're going to generate is going to last for 7 years, because that's the average lifespan of a client. So even though the first year they're only generating $50,000, over that lifespan of the client, they're going to generate $350,000 from these clients, these new clients that they've acquired. And that's where a lot of small businesses, they tend to equivocate, because then it's a matter of faith. Should I invest that huge sum of money initially with potentially only so little for the first year? And why should I have that faith? And that's the hard part, and that's what makes I don't want to say mediocre, but average companies from good companies. The good companies trust their processes, they trust their scalable engines of growth, and they don't mind investing the money because they see the return in the long term. It's going to be positive. Which brings another point that takes us to the next slide, Paula. And that is the cash flow. If you're going to be spending $83,000 to generate $80,000, that put you $33,000 in the hole for the first year, which brings up the importance of understanding what your cash flow statement is and how to keep track of your cash flow. And that's when we move into now the finances of the business. So what is cash flow? Cash flow is basically tracking your cash, what you start with, how much cash is coming in every month, how much cash is going out every month, what's the balance that you carry over for the next month. It's very much like balancing your personal checkbook. I don't know if people still do it nowadays. I don't balance a checkbook. I download everything online. But if people balance their checkbooks, it's pretty much the same concept. What's your current cash position? How much new cash came in during the month? How much cash went out? And what's your end position? That's basically cash flow statement.
And then how does that segue into the sales piece?
Right. So it is important to know what your cash flow position is, because if you're going to be investing in marketing and sales and your return on investment is not going to materialize for the next 2, 3, 5 years, potentially, you have to make sure that you have enough of a cash cushion into your bank so that you don't run into trouble. And this is a cash flow statement here that shows what we just talked about. Let's say in July, you're starting with $4,000. You bring in $5,000 in sales. You pay from your account receivables $1,500. I'm sorry, you receive from your account receivable $1,500. That's a total of $6,500 in receipts. But let's say the cost of goods sold is $2,000 that you paid. You also paid account payables $1,000. You had fixed expenses of $1,500, like your utilities or whatever else, rent, loan payment of $1,000. So if your cash out is $5,500, you end up with a positive $1,000 of cash flow for that month. So your cash position went from $4,000 in July to $5,000 in August. And if you go through that for August, and if your sales start dropping, so you see here in August, instead of doing 5,000 sales, now you drop to 3,000 in sales, you could end up with a negative cash flow for the month, which reduces your cash position for the following month, and so on and so forth. The point that I want to make here is it's important that you understand what your cash position is, particularly if your business is seasonal or fluctuates. And also I want to point out the importance of having a predictable sales pipeline to the figuring out what your cash flow position is. If you don't have a predictable sales pipeline, then your cash position could be at risk. And a lot of small businesses find themselves struggling, trying to figure out how to get more cash when they need it because their sales numbers are not predictable, which brings us to the point that we started this series with, is the importance of building a predictable sales process.
Now we talk about that, Nabil, and you and I had a detailed conversation about seasonality of business, and I want to spend some time here because I think that there are a lot of folks in that situation. Do you have any specific recommendations for them to try to solidify that? I mean, obviously, we have less people that are here during the summer months. Do you suggest that they spend more of their marketing budget when it's not season, or what's your recommendation to them?
I'm sorry, is this regarding a predictable sales process?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, going back to the beginning of this series, we talked about understanding your sales process, documenting it, training your salespeople and your staff and using it, using CRM and other tools, tracking all your metrics, understanding your processes ins and outs, making sure that you have scalable engines of growth. I mean, all these elements are essential in making sure that you have a predictable sales process. If any of them falls short, you could potentially lose control of your sales process. So everything that we've covered this month is basically elements that help a small business owner, number one, understands the importance of a predictable sales process, and then all the elements that are necessary in order to achieve it and maintain it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I wanted you to highlight that because I think that there's a lot of pieces in the other workshops that we did that build upon this and create more sustainability in that sales process.
Right. And yes, at times it is going to be a seasonal business. It is going to be fluctuating in terms of sales, but as long as it's predictable. So if you know your summer season is going to be a slow season, that's fine. As long as you know that you're expecting a 20, 30, potentially more percentage of reduction in sales. But as long as you're aware of it and you could predict it, then you could plan for it and you could have enough of a cash cushion to fall on when your revenue starts dropping. The main issue happens is when business owners don't have that predictability because they either can't track, they can't measure, they can't create standard processes. That's typically what gets them into trouble.
Absolutely. And also not using financial metrics.
Yes. The financial metrics, I mean, these are the key performance indicators of any business that we're showing here. Every business owner needs to understand these. And it's interesting, we're doing a forum next month on this specific topic, and we started a survey to see whether our score clients keep track of these metrics. And Paula, you'll be surprised about the number of people that actually don't. They don't, and many of them not only don't keep track of it, they don't understand these KPIs or these metrics, which are, it's like, I mean, these are the vital signs of a business, and every business owner should know what they are.
Exactly. I think there's a piece that's missing here. I see so many people come into a business and they have a vision or a dream, and they feel like they have a customer base to launch something that is driven by their entrepreneurial spirit, and there's a lack of planning when it comes to understanding these key pieces and keeping that spirit alive.
Yes.
You talk about the vital signs. It's kind of like, our own human body. If we were to just eat McDonald's every single day and not monitor our heart rate, we probably would be in a big heap of trouble. So I think that that's one of the things we need to bring to people's attention is this is about the health and vitality of your business, and understanding the health and vitality of your business comes down to these metrics.
Yes, and to quickly go over them, Paula, and next month we're going to have dedicated live streams about these topics, and I encourage everybody to attend next month's series. Sales, obviously, everybody should know what their sales are. Cost of goods sold, or your variable costs, that's basically the cost of delivering a product or a service. If you take sales, subtract from it that cost of goods sold, that will give you your gross profit. If you take your gross profit divided by sales, that gives you your gross profit margin. If you take your gross profit, subtract from it your fixed costs, those are the costs that you're going to have to pay whether you sell anything or not. That's like your rent, your utilities, any overhead that's involved with running your business. You subtract the fixed cost from your gross profit, that gives you your net profit. And then if you take your net profit divided by your sales, that gives you your net profit margins. And those are, it's like measuring, like you just said, measuring your pulse, measuring your pressure. Those are the vital signs of your business that every business owner should know.
Now, once we dive into income and they actually have income, you talked about these. I love this slide, and I love this slide because it really provides you with some extremely valuable information with respect to the ratios. You want to talk about this, Nabil, and the differentiation here?
This is a good example of an income statement. You could see at the high level your income, that's your sales, your revenue. It varies month over month based on your sales, obviously. Below it, you see the cost of goods sold. This is typically a constant percentage of sales, because if you sell a lot of pizzas, that means you're going to have to incur costs regarding buying flour, tomato sauce, all the items that go on that pizza. If you don't sell that many pizzas, then obviously you don't incur these costs. So that's typically a fixed percentage of sales. It could vary a little bit, but it's usually fixed, constant. But the actual value of the cost of goods sold changes month by month based on what your sales are, right? So even though the actual value of cost of goods sold is varying month after month, the ratio is constant.
So it's a static percentage always of the sales.
Yeah, you could see that clearly. I hope that came across.
Absolutely.
So if you subtract the cost of goods sold from your sale, that gives you your gross profit. And then if you divide that by your sales, that's your gross profit margin. So you see here, again, your gross profit margin is typically fixed because, again, your cost of goods sold are fixed. But the gross profit vary month by month based on whatever your sales are. Once you get a better feel for these numbers, things will start making a little more sense to you. After that, the fixed costs from their name, they're fixed. They don't change month by month. I mean, if they change, they don't change that much. So you see here the fixed costs, again, that's like your rent, your utilities, any salaries that you pay people that you have on a full-time basis working for you. Those costs are fixed month after month. But if you take those costs and divide them by your sales, then that ratio is not fixed. It's actually changing based on your sales. And then if you subtract your fixed costs from your gross profit, that gives you your net profit or loss, obviously. And that's going to be varying as well based on your revenue. So that number here and the ratio fluctuate based on your revenue.
Nabil, quick question for you. When it comes to looking at whether people are looking at their income statement or whether they're looking at cash flow statements, how often do you think that folks should be taking a look at these numbers?
When I was running my business, I looked at it every month. I wanted to make sure that my gross profit margins, where they needed to be, that we weren't slipping down a slippery slope over the long term. Obviously, keeping a good records and accurate and up-to-date data is essential before you could derive these accurate numbers. So make sure your bookkeeping habits are top-notch, that you're tracking all your expenses on a timely basis, and then every month generate your income statement and balance sheets and take a look at them and look at your ratios and make sure everything is kosher and what they need to be. Not only you could compare what you're seeing month to month or quarter to quarter, particularly if your business is seasonal. Also, it's important that you compare where you fall compared to your industry. And if you have access to Mergent Intellect, which is a free tool that you could get from your local library here in Manatee or in Sarasota, I believe they offer either that same tool or similar. They will tell you based on your industry SIC code or NAICS code what some of these metrics should be, so you can compare how you're performing against your peers, and you want to make sure that you're outperforming.
That's really good information for them to take a look at. And, even if you don't have QuickBooks, a lot of this stuff you can simply track using an Excel spreadsheet. And what I used to tell my clients is, look, if this is not your strong suit, you still need to be looking at this. Maybe you should hire someone or outsource to someone and have them be compiling these numbers for you so that you are looking at them on a regular basis.
Very good advice.
So how do they know? How do they know if their sales strategy is working?
Attend all these workshops that we did this month, Paula.
That's how they're going to know. Yeah, exactly. I agree with you.
Yeah.
And last month too. I think there were some really good good tidbits last month, especially within the marketing segments there. But I'll tell you the big takeaway that I think most people in the comments that I saw from the workshops is, wow, the financial metrics and really drilling down on data and information technology can really be driving decisions. And it's a big piece of business nowadays when it used to not be there at all. And I think that a lot of folks, it's hard to make that transition, not only mentally, but also logistically, and looking at those metrics.
I fully agree. We bring up a lot of questions here too for people to consider. Is your cost per lead where it needs to be? Again, you got to look at your engines of growth and see if they're scalable. And if they're not scalable, your cost per lead could vary if you're trying to scale. So you got to be very careful there. How have you tried different lead generation methods and channels? We've addressed many different channels over the past couple of months, but there are many more, obviously. So my recommendation to my clients is you got to have at least 2 successful channels that are working for you. Don't put all your faith and trust just into one channel. It's good to have one, but you need to have at least 2 of them.
And you can really track that with client relationship management software. Getting the answers to these questions can be super simple. And then also looking at getting, consistent quality leads across your lead generation campaigns. A lot of this information is generated through the client relationship management system, and gathering that information. When you enter leads into a CRM, you can segment them or tag them, and you can note where that lead is coming from. So when you're generating reports on a monthly basis, when you're looking at your metrics and you're looking at your channels, this really will help you in guiding your decisions as well.
Yeah, you hit it on the head, Paula, here. They have to keep track of all that data in a very accurate way. I know salespeople don't like to use these CRMs sometimes, or they don't put the necessary data there, but companies and particularly managers of the salespeople have to be diligent about making sure that that data goes in, because without it, you're not going to be able to tell whether you're moving in the right direction and if you could scale and where you should scale.
Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that lead generation channels being scalable?
Yeah, it's just like what we mentioned earlier. If let's say your lead generation method is word of mouth, it's basically your customers telling other people about you. You don't have control over that. You can't scale it. You can't blow it up by throwing more money at it. But if your lead generation process involves social media, for instance, or search engines like pay-per-click or different kind of advertising that is scalable, because these channels have access to millions and billions of people actually, then you have processes in place that allow you to scale. And it's important that you know the difference between the scalable and the non-scalable channels. The non-scalable channels, if you throw more money at them, it not necessarily will generate additional leads, but the scalable channels will.
Great. That delineation, I think, is so important for folks, because especially if you are driving your business with simply getting referrals, you're not going to be able to just throw money at that and have it increase your sales.
Yeah.
Generating enough leads before hiring a salesperson. Please take that on and explain that.
Yeah, so again, a lot of my score clients ask me, should I hire a salesperson or should I spend more money on marketing? And typically my question to them is, if you hire a salesperson, can you give them enough leads to keep them busy the whole day? If you're going to hire them on a full-time basis, for instance, they're going to be working for you 8 hours a day. Do you have enough leads to give them so they could pursue them 8 hours a day? If you don't have enough leads, that person is going to become very expensive because they're either going to be doing marketing for you instead of sales or
Mm-hmm.
wasting their time. So it's important to have these metrics in place and monitor them. And I tell business owners, when you run out of time pursuing the leads that you're generating, this is the time that you start thinking about bringing in salespeople. And then you add additional salespeople as these people's time start to fill up with the leads that you're giving them.
That's such a valuable piece of information because I think that when businesses struggle with marketing, they just want to hire a salesperson. They think that if they hire a salesperson, that person will just go out and generate more sales and they'll generate the leads. And that's not the case. And I think that that's a huge mistake that a lot of businesses make. Is I'm just going to hire a salesperson. They're just going to go generate leads and generate sales. That's what I'm hiring them to do.
Yes, and in certain businesses, maybe particularly if you're building strategic relationships with much larger companies or higher level executives, for instance, potentially that may be a good solution. But if your customer acquisition cost is in the $1,000, for instance, you need to have inside salespeople that have enough leads so you could keep them occupied in pursuing, nurturing these leads and closing that business, as opposed to generating leads for you.
Understandable. This next bullet point in terms of lead closing ratio, is it where it needs to be? I think there's a lot of folks that don't even look at this. Again, it's one of those pieces and one of those metrics that you need to be taking a look at on a regular basis, and how you might be falling short there. I know within businesses that I've been involved in, if you're not closing leads on a high ratio, then there might be some kind of issue in your sales process. And I think that that's something that a lot of folks need to take a closer look at. Do you have any words of advice for them around that, Nabil?
Yeah, I mean, the beauty about having a higher closing ratio is that you don't need to invest any more marketing dollars to get more business because you're just
Absolutely.
closing more leads. And the issue may not just be in the process, it may be in the price, it may be in the quality of the product, it may be in many different aspects. So yeah, I mean, it's important that you compare what your closing ratio is compared to in your industry, what it is. And if you're falling below where the industry is, you got to take a closer look at potentially your sales process, potentially your value proposition, potentially also other factors that could impact it.
You went over cash flow positive, and also generating enough gross and net profit margins. Any final comments on that?
Yeah, so if your gross margins are not where they need to be, this is an issue that I would recommend that everybody will look at initially, because that tells you you're probably spending too much money on either executing your service or producing your product. So there's some efficiencies and some streamlining that need to take place in your value chain in order to improve your gross margins. As far as your profit margins, if that is too low, your fixed costs could also be quite high there. So you got to consider potentially reducing some of your overhead in order to improve that margin. But you could tell whether you're doing well or not, again, by looking at your industry, seeing where you stand compared to them.
Fantastic. Open for any final comments, Nabil. Clearly we've provided a lot of valuable information over the past 4 weeks when it comes to sales. We really want to invite you to continue on this path with us in this journey. The month of March is going to be completely focused on financial sustainability and really diving into a lot of this information. Any final comments that you have, Nabil?
I want to thank you and Jack and Jeremy and Peter, everybody else that contributed to the series. I think lot of that information was captured in the recordings that we've done. They are on our website. I know it's a lot of information, a lot of details, and some of it may be a little too cumbersome, complicated for our SCORE clients to go through by themselves. This is where we strongly recommend that you contact your SCORE mentor. And if you don't have one, just get one. They're free of charge. Your SCORE mentor, if they don't have the expertise that is needed in those specific areas, they could always call on the ones in our chapter or elsewhere with that subject matter expertise, so they can make it available to you.
Yeah, we've put our poll out there too, if you wouldn't mind filling that in for us. This helps us in understanding who our audience is and making sure that we're providing you guys with the best possible information. So if you wouldn't mind just filling that out. And then if you have any questions for Nabil or myself, you can post those in the Q&A. Nabil, I want to thank you. I think a lot of this information are pieces that people, they know they need to take a look at, but they really don't want to take a look at, oh, I've got my CPA for that, or, you know, whomever. But the frequency at which you're paying attention to this information can really help you in guiding your decisions and making better choices, more strategic choices that will lead to higher profitability. And I think that that's super valuable for folks. So I appreciate you sharing that knowledge and that information with people. It's truly valuable. And we appreciate you guys attending as well, coming on board with us. We hope to see you all again in March and look forward to talking with you then.
Thank you very much, Paula.
Thanks, Nabil. Take care now.
You too.